Well, hello, folks. I am in the woods, not far from my house, and over the last few weeks, I've been really taking advantage of this weather, which is chilly. It's like probably 40s right now, but it's not snowy and not too cold, and I've been going for lots and lots of walks. It's really my favorite thing, or one of my very favorite things to do these days. And wearing the Seiko Black Monster on the rubber strap. And I was thinking about something that a viewer, Navarrete, I apologize, Louis or Louis, I think Luis, Louis. I'm doing it with a French accent, that's not right. Well, Louis was commenting on something I had said about Nirvana. I was talking about Watch Nirvana, but also Nirvana. And development. And it seemed to be, I don't think I can switch over to it on my phone to read the quote, but it seemed to be that he was talking about how development, in a way, our need to develop, or the process of development, blocks nirvana, or deep fulfillment and satisfaction. Because in a way, that's what nirvana is. I used the term in that last video, and I mentioned how the word means to be blown out. Oh, that's one translation. I'm sure there's other ways to translate it. Not blowing, not moving. And you could say, in a way, not developing, or not seeking to develop, not seeking. And especially from a Western perspective, but I think a modern perspective in general, that seems to be, well, what's the fun of that, right? What's the point? And I would actually agree with that. I would agree with that nirvanic approach, or you could say the extreme Eastern paradigm, on its own leads to a kind of nihilism. It leads to a kind of negation of the splendor of existence, of being alive. Whereas the more extreme Western approach, and again, I'm stereotyping, I'm using these as flexible ideological symbols in a way. The extreme of it is to constantly search and build and seek, and this endless, almost devouring consumption, right? Consumerism is, in a way, the shadow of that Western movement of striving. I say it's the shadow because it's a pale version of the deeper sort of underlying impulse, which is creativity. And, you know, I think it really, in some ways, it goes back to Plato. I forget who it was. Was it Alfred North Whitehead? Some recent contemporary 20th century philosopher, coming up to these falls, by the way, said that the history of Western philosophy is essentially a series of footnotes to Plato. You know, meaning that Plato covered all the essentials. But Plato had this configuration of being and becoming. And in a way, the way I'm using East and West is Eastern philosophy, Eastern spirituality, that underlying impulse is beingness. Whereas the Western is focused on the becoming. Look at this beautiful waterfall. And yes, there is a dog. That's Willa. I probably won't talk a huge amount. I don't know if the noise of the waterfall is too much while I'm standing here. You know what, I'm going to pause it here for a moment and I will continue on with being and becoming. Okay, I'm moving away from the waterfall. I just wanted to sit and enjoy that without having the camera held up in front of my face. So, being and becoming. And I'm equating these ideas of Plato with East and Western spiritual traditions. And when I say spiritual traditions, I'm not really sure what the right term would be, but it's something like, I mean more like the underlying spiritual impulse, spiritual cultural impulse that, or from which the different religious traditions, philosophical traditions, cultural traditions emerge. And I do think that there are distinct Eastern and Western underlying impulses. Look how calm it is up here. I'm just right over the waterfall. A little mossy bank. This will all be covered in snow. Probably a few weeks. I don't know. We'll see. So, Plato was really oriented towards the discovery of beingness. So in a way, he had a Eastern vibe to him. Aristotle, in a way, cut that out and focused more on the manifestation of forms, and his ideas were more less metaphysical and more materialistic. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but in a way they were more practical. And I think more from Aristotle, we've gotten some of the underlying ideas of science and Western cognition from Aristotle. But being and becoming. And I would say that what Louis was talking about with regards to development, or I guess what I was talking to about and he's responding, is very much of that Western becoming. And it's an ongoing, I mean, we see it in the manifest universe. The manifest universe, you know, regardless of what really, what was the creation and so forth. I mean, if we take some variation of the Big Bang to be true, approximately 14 billion years ago, or a little less, I think the current estimate's around 13.7 or 13.8. What difference does it make, right? So around 14 billion years ago, the entire universe, you know, there's the basic idea that it expanded from this quantum singularity, or it burst forth. I don't think we know whether it burst forth or whether it expanded. Willa is wanting me to walk more, so I will in a moment. Should we look downstream or upstream? Let's look upstream. So from this point of the universe bursting forth, expanding outward, it's never stopped. It just keeps on going. And not only does it keep on going, but it diversifies and it complexifies. It becomes more and more complex. Endless variation. We can imagine, we don't know for sure, but we can imagine that there are all kinds of different life forms throughout the universe. I think, I would speculate that there is life on the planets and even the sun that we just don't have. It's so different from us that we can't even recognize it as life. Who knows? I mean, what if there are sort of vaporous, hyperdimensional beings in the gases of Saturn and Jupiter. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. I have an incoming call. I'm going to decline it. It's probably my neighbor wanting something from me. Anyways, the point being that there's this endless process of becoming. And we're very much part of that. We are becoming, and we are unique expressions of that 14 billion year process. 14 billion years have created us as a species, but also us as individuals. I mean, this is why I find human beings so amazing, is that each of us is a unique expression. And I think, certainly some people are more unique than others. And there is definitely a herd mentality. And there is a sort of, I don't want to sound too elitist here, but I do think in general there's a little bit of a pyramid where there's a lot of people who kind of conform to certain things, and less people that are truly unique. But even the most conforming person is still unique. There's no one exactly like them, and that's an amazing thing. And it also, I think, points to how we should honor every single person as a unique expression of the cosmos, so to speak. So this is an outlook that you don't need any metaphysical beliefs. You don't need to believe in religion or God, but it does, in my opinion, it does point towards a sense of wonder and a sense of, I would even say, love for existence and love for our fellow beings, not just human, but non-human. As Alan Watts liked to say, that every single being considers itself a person in its own way of conception and conceiving and thinking and consciousness. So the process of becoming is endless. Now, what has happened, though, is that we have this separation from beingness. And this is at the root of this kind of core existential suffering. Now, the trick, though, this is the funny thing. I don't know if it's funny as much as it's tragic and comic at the same time. I'm going to be going up. I'm actually pausing because I don't want to go up this hill and huff and puff. I'm working on it. Someday I'd like to be able to go up this hill and have calm breath. Anyways, the separation from being is only apparent, and that's really kind of the key that we forgot and that we forget, that we don't realize, is that we're not separate from being, that we're not separate from the ground of who we truly are, of the plenum, so to speak, of existence. And that core existential suffering of separation is based on an illusion, a misperception. So I apologize for that, folks. I was having a little feeling of doubt and guilt about not responding to the call from my neighbor. So I checked my message, and it wasn't really a big deal. So all is good. So just enjoying the wind and the dry leaves. It's interesting. It's like, even if you look at this tree here, it's it's going into hibernation, and I believe it's a beech. It looks birch-like. I think it's a beech. I'm not sure. Anyways, it's definitely not a birch. There's a bunch of old, crisp leaves that are totally lifeless. Yet it's still beautiful in its own way. It it's not in the full flowering of its greenness and or how it looks in, say, June, but it's just part of the cycle. And actually, in a way, in this, we see the fundamental flaw in the becoming only mentality. Becoming only, meaning only focus upon development in whatever form. Because becoming, there are many different variations. I think underlying it, it's creativity, it's art, it's development, it's building, it's architecture, it's consumption, it's power, it's seeking power. That's one often very pathological form of becoming, where one's life becomes focused on power. It's very common in the West. And it's the flaw in it is that it's based upon this illusion that you can win. And you can't. It's impossible. You know? I mean, you can have your moments of glory. You can make that deal that brings in a big cash windfall. Is that the right term? Or you can win the World Series. You know, but eventually you're going to be that former star who's, you know, not what you were and you're living in the past. Or you're going to, or somebody else. What often happens when you gain power is everyone wants a gun for you. You're at the top. You're the guy they want to take down. And the thing is that I'm not saying all of this is completely wrong. Yes, there's a pathology there. But in my opinion, underlying even the quest for power is almost this noble impulse to become more, to manifest into the world as who one is. It's just that we get lost. I mean, that's what the word sin means. It means to miss the mark. So we're all sinners. We miss the mark of what you could almost conceive of as a more natural, healthy development. Everyone. I've never met somebody who is fully healthy, who is fully, you know, beyond redemption, or who that's the other one. That's the other extreme. Yeah, I don't think I've ever met somebody who's fully pathological. There's some people that are pretty damn close. Sociopaths. Maybe they are beyond. Maybe they are completely. They're like the viruses that you can't. They're just there to keep us awake, not too complacent. So the impulse is the basic impulse of the universe. It's that developmental urge, that becomingness, and it just becomes skewed. And I think what happens is that, I mean, I think in a way the bottom line is that we're becoming. It has the delusional, or at least in human beings, we enter into the delusional mindset where we try to reach absolute fulfillment. And we try to, become absolute power, become king of the world, even if it's just our own little world. We try to, even if it's just ruling your marriage or becoming the big dog at work. Most of us, our sights start really high. And when we're kids, we imagine ourselves as, Babe Ruth or Barry Bonds or Michael Jordan or the president. Or, we all have these delusions of this desire for grandeur. And eventually we modify our expectations and hopes. And we might want to become the boss, the manager of our district or whatever it is, right? So we're all seeking this ultimate fulfillment, and what the error is what we're really seeking is beingness. is the pure beingness that is already who we are. So it's this terrible irony because we think we're separate from being, and we think that we can win the game of becoming. We think we can become the best. Maybe men are more drawn to that game of power. I think women have a different variation. It's not that women don't fall into that too, but I do think there are sort of male-female variations. You know, there's always exceptions, and there's always, you know, there are certain underlying similarities. But I think men seem particularly focused on trying to win. Could be wrong. Or maybe women are just good at hiding it. So, this irony. We feel separate. So we think we're separate. We think that we're on our own in the universe. And from a certain perspective, we totally are. That's the existential reality, at least viewed from a certain level. Problem with existentialism is that existentialists think they've reached the end of the line. They think that their way of seeing the world is how it actually is. I mean, this is what we all do. But none of us are there. You know, there's always more. Whew. We're not going that way. Vuela. She is so happy out here. So, yeah. Keep on getting distracted by my own tangents. So we have this misperception, this feeling of separation that we seek to fulfill or fill through the process of becoming. And in my opinion, it's like the right movement but the wrong solution. Like, meaning that the becomingness, that urge within us is just this natural desire, that there's nothing wrong with desire in and of itself. But where it kind of gets obfuscated or confused is when it tries to find it out there, tries to find ultimate fulfillment out there, it tries to win, we try to extend our ego out there and create our own little empire, so to speak. And it's a fool's errand. It's a fool's quest. It won't, it ends up ultimately being a disappointment in whatever way. But so the quote unquote nirvanic experience is a shift in this perception. It's a shift of something very fundamental. And it has to do with, as far as I understand it, and from the glimpses I've had, so to speak, it has to do with a deep recognition that we are already and cannot ever not be one with being. We are being itself. No matter what, that which we seek, this ultimate fulfillment, this something out there, it's right here. Like it's right here in this moment. We don't need it. We don't need anything. We don't need the next watch. We don't need that next sexual experience, or that we don't need to become the boss. We don't need to extend our domain. And that this moment is perfect as it is. It's perfect. There's nothing that needs to be added to it. Now, it's depending upon the situation, it's, easier or harder to realize that. As I said to somebody in one of my comments, the great Indian sage Vivekananda, who was one of the first Indians to really bring Hindu and yogic philosophy to the West around the turn of the 19th to 20th century. He said that, in terms of the quest for enlightenment, it's better to be sort of middle class, because if you're poor or rich, or too poor or too rich, you become too focused on your material possessions, your material economic situation. If you're really poor, then it's hard not, you're struggling to make it, and that becomes, it's so dominant. If you're really wealthy, you can kind of pretend for a long time and shovel stuff in, new experiences, new stuff. I mean, think of all the all the reviews, all the products, consumer reports, right? What can you buy next? What do you need next? And we are a very wealthy culture. I'm not just talking about the United States, but certainly most of Europe, certainly Western Europe, Australia, increasingly in other parts of the world. And some of that is a good thing, but we've lost our way. And we've lost our way in two ways, in my opinion. At least I'm just kind of going off what I've been saying before. We think that we're separate from being, so that basic underlying sense of oneness has been lost, which has led to, that's one, which has led to sort of this twisting of the basic urge to become into a search for power and or fulfillment. And so we've twisted the becoming. We've lost connection with being and twisted becoming. So yeah, we're up shit creek. But it's awesome. It's also really, I mean, how cool is this? How cool is this reality? And that's the thing. So, just to try to circle back a little bit, it's interesting that I'm wanting to circle back because I'm actually turning back on my walk. Nice timing. To what Louis Navarrete, I really apologize, Louis or Louis. I'm guessing that your name is, is it Spanish? Maybe even Italian? I don't know. I'm not that well versed in languages. Anyways, just to circle back and connect what I've been talking about to what you were saying, I would say that the pathological form of becoming does obscure nirvana or realization of being, because that's really what nirvana is in a way. Willa, this way. Come on. She stopped. She doesn't want to turn back. Willa! Come on. Come on, girl. Willa. Come on. This way. Come on, Willa. Come on. Here she comes. There's a good girl. She really doesn't. She was very... Come on. No. Come on. Willa, come on. She could walk endlessly. She does get... After we've been going for about an hour, although probably 15 minutes of that has been stopped, she usually starts slowing down around now. She's 9, I think. So she's definitely late middle-aged in dog years. Anyways, where was I? I think I hear a woodpecker. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, it's just a little guy. It's not one of those. You probably won't be able to see it. It's very far up there. I don't think I can get it in there. It's up there somewhere. Anyways, so nirvana is realization of being, but it's realization of it on a profound level. It's not just a thought. But see, this is because it's a very tricky thing. Because essentially, no matter what we do, any attempt to attain nirvana is part of that same movement. And I think that's what Louis was kind of questioning or asking about or saying. Because it's not, being cannot be found through becoming. What becoming really is, it's the expression of being. It's the dance of being. It's like the Hindu idea of Shiva, of the Kashmir Shivism, that becoming is the dance of Shiva. Shiva dancing. But you can't discover your Shiva-ness through becoming, except within becoming. So it's a little tricky. It's like no amount of development, nothing you create in this world will directly, causally lead to realization of being. Because you already are it. I mean, this is the irony of it, is every single person already is the one, is being. We just don't realize it. We're for the most part. So I mean, it's interesting because some people wake up to this all in a flash, and they're forever one with being, and they're totally immersed in this. Some people, it's a gradual process. Most people never fully do, but every single person has glimpses of it, in my opinion. That's just a hypothesis. Every single person has glimpses of true being, of nirvana. And, it's, even if it's just a modest, tame version of it, it could be that moment where you climb a mountain and you get to the top, and then you just look at what you see and everything falls away. All the garbage, all the stuff, all the crap, all the seeking for power, all the struggles, all the relationship dynamics, all the bullshit at work that all of us have to experience. All of our own garbage, and we just have this pure moment of, wow, openness. Our whole being opens up. Our consciousness expands to embrace the entire manifestation. And it's already expanded, but it's just that our locus, our individual awareness is contracted because of our various specific individual patterns of becoming. So we've all experienced that, in whatever way, and we have, and for some people it there's so many different variations. Spiritual traditions. One of the ways that meditation was described to me at one point was, or I might have read this, I can't remember, was that enlightenment is really, it's like falling off a log. This is a Buddhist teaching. You can't make it happen. You can't intentionally fall, because when you do, your intentions behind it. It's an act of becoming in the terminology I've been using. But what you can do is create a context where you're more accident prone, which is what meditation is. Meditation does not lead to enlightenment or awakening or falling off the log. But in a way, it creates a context where it's more likely to happen, or you're more likely to wake up to what already is. To wake up to the fact that you already are that. Now, it can get very, very tricky because sometimes you can have a glimpse of that and you're like, oh, I want more of that. That was amazing. Because it really, I mean, it's like it shouldn't be confused with sort of ecstasy. But the awakening experience is marvelous, really, because it's a sense of deep rightness. It's a sense of all of the drama. You know, underneath all that, it's okay. It's all right. And it actually can lead to some interesting ruminations. One of the things that seems to be a natural result of awakening is the fear of death either disappears or at least greatly diminishes. Now, this doesn't mean that an awakened person, when faced with their death in that moment, will not contract. But most of us walk around with a little bug in the back of the mind of fear of death. You know, that we're most people try to just avoid it. You could argue, I think there's a valid psychological orientation that everything we do is denial of death. There's a author, Ernest Becker, psychologist and philosopher, who wrote a book called Denial of Death, which is about that. He's kind of a great existential psychologist. Denial of death. That if I can build my empire, whether it's my spouse, 2 kids, 2 cars, house, the American dream, or whether it's my corporate empire, or whether it's my grand artistic work, that somehow in that I become immortal. Now, I've always sort of found that funny because for me, like, even though I'd rather die knowing that I had, look at that granite, big chunk of rock left by the Ice Age, I would imagine, retreating glaciers 12,000 years ago. But I'd rather be in that moment of death knowing that I had accomplished some of these core things that I want to experience in this life. There are some things. I actually believe quite strongly that we all have our own individual. Destiny is not quite the right word because it has too much baggage. But we all have our own individual sort of meaning to unfold in this world. And it really, really is completely different for all of us. And it's not so much that if you do it, you win. If you don't do it, you fail. It's a matter of more, how do you do it? How do you unfold that? There's this basic potential packet that we all have. And there are specific things, I think, or not necessarily specific things, but there are general things that we wish to bring into the world that we individualize. And often that takes the form of a specific career path. And I think people know, when they're in the right career or not, when what they're doing is aligned with this deeper impulse. And most people, it's not. It's kind of sad. Anyways, I'd rather face that moment of death, feeling like, you know what, I did what I wanted to do, for the most part. Yeah, there's maybe specific details here and there that were lacking, but I wrote the books I wanted to write. I had the relationships that I wanted to have, etc. But I imagine that would change my experience of death to some degree. But on the other hand, I still wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to die, I'm going to end, but at least my empire is left behind. I don't think I'd care at that moment. And that's part of the great equalization that is life, you know. Steve Jobs, who was pretty much cited by everyone in American culture in particular, but probably throughout the world, really, as the biggest winner ever. You know, he's like innovated our whole way of being, our whole not being in the sense of Plato, but our existence. You know, some people seem to deify him. He's almost like the modern day Jesus, and but he died in his 50s, right? So even Steve Jobs couldn't keep the Grim Reaper at bay. Even he couldn't. And this isn't to demean him at all or to put down his life. I mean, I think he must have been deeply fulfilled on some level. I mean, how could he not have been? But at the same time, you know, he still died pretty young. So, yeah, I mean, to kind of wrap this up a little bit, becoming or development or creativity is only a block to nirvana if we think that we are going to get ultimate fulfillment through that development. And this is the people that get involved in spirituality and meditation and so forth. They're just replacing, their corporate job or their strivings in the external world with the striving for enlightenment. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. You know, it's just another version. It's not really any different. You're still trying to win. It's just that now you've kind of boiled it down to this most abstract, elusive principle that is enlightenment. And it's like the carrot before the donkey. As long as you're reaching for it, it's going to move away. So it's this terrible paradox. I mean, I think one way to sort of express that is, Zen more than any other tradition focuses on this specific element, which is basically, how do you let go through trying to let go? Because the very process of trying is not letting go. Or how do you relax intentionally? Intention is an activity, a movement of non-relaxation. Just relax. Dude, just relax. It doesn't work. There's no such thing as just relax. There's no... To relax isn't really a verb. You can simulate relaxation. You can act it. But relaxation is... And even that... I'm going to relax now. Can't do it. But it can happen to you. You can have those moments where all of a sudden you turn away from the attempt to relax, to wake up, and boom, you're there. And I don't know anyone who's had this experience who didn't feel that this was deeply right. Oh, this is what it is to be alive. This is what human existence is. It doesn't mean that all of this other stuff is fake, that our striving, that our seeking, that our normal state of mind is wrong and everything before enlightenment is just an error and we need to like get there. If anything, it's the realization that all of it is right. It is an expression of our innate beingness, that we're not, it's all good. I mean, but on a really deep level. Now, of course, I wouldn't say that if I got attacked by a bear right now. I would not be thinking, oh, this is all good. I try to actually get the bear to attack Willa instead, to be honest. Not because I value my life over Willa's, although I do, I must admit. But also because I don't want to die, let alone be mauled by a bear. And also I have children. Willa's not going to provide for my children. Would you protect me from a bear, Willa? She might bark at it. She'd howl at it, I think. Yeah. She probably would protect me, or she'd be very upset, and maybe that would scare the bear away. But I wouldn't be saying this is all good. But that there is, you see this with animals. Actually, it's really quite remarkable. Animals will fight and fight and fight and not want to be killed. But it seems that what I've perceived, at least from watching nature programs, that at some point they give in. They just surrender. Now, I don't know if that's just, the cynic in me says, well, that's just because they're like, they've lost all the blood and their nervous system's shot and they're in shock. But maybe that's what shock is a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's just sort of like, okay, this is what is, and I might as well just surrender to it. So I've been all over the place. I don't know if I really adequately addressed Louis' question or concern or comment. I think I traveled all over Tarnation and back here, and you came along with me. So I will see you folks later. Said that the history of Western philosophy is essentially a series of footnotes to Plato. Meaning that Plato covered all the essentials. But Plato had this configuration of being and becoming. And in a way, the way I'm using East and West is Eastern philosophy, Eastern spirituality, that underlying impulse is beingness. Whereas the Western is focused on the becoming. Look at this beautiful waterfall. And yes, there is a dog. That's Willa. I probably won't talk a huge amount. I don't know if the noise of the waterfall is too much while I'm standing here. Or the process of development blocks nirvana or deep fulfillment and satisfaction. Because in a way, that's what nirvana is. I used the term in that last video, and I mentioned how the word means to be blown out. Oh, that's one translation. I'm sure there's other ways to translate it. Not blowing, not moving. And you could say, in a way, not developing or not seeking to develop, not seeking. And especially from a Western perspective, but I think a modern perspective in general, that seems to be, well, what's the fun of that, right? What's the point? And I would actually agree with that. I would agree with that nirvanic approach, or you could say the extreme Eastern paradigm, on its own leads to a kind of nihilism. It leads to a kind of negation of the splendor of existence, of being alive. Whereas the more extreme Western approach, and again I'm stereotyping, I'm using these as flexible ideological symbols in a way. The extreme of it is to constantly search and build and seek, and this endless, almost devouring consumption, right? Consumerism is, in a way, the shadow of that Western movement of striving. I say it's the shadow because it's a pale version of the deeper sort of underlying impulse, which is creativity. And, you know, I think it really, in some ways, it goes back to Plato. I forget who it was. Was it Alfred North Whitehead? Some recent contemporary 20th century philosopher. Coming up to these falls, by the way, these days. And wearing the Seiko Black Monster on the rubber strap. And I was thinking about something that a viewer, Louis Navarrete, I apologize, Louis or Louis, I think Luis, Louis. I'm doing it with a French accent, that's not right. Well, Louis was commenting on something I had said about nirvana. I was talking about watch nirvana, but also nirvana. And development. And it seemed to be, I don't think I can switch over to it on my phone to read the quote, but it seemed to be that he was talking about how development, in a way, our need to develop Well, hello folks. I am in the woods, not far from my house, and over the last few weeks, I've been really taking advantage of this weather, which is chilly. It's like probably 40s right now, but it's not snowy and not too cold, and I've been going for lots and lots of walks. It's really my favorite thing, or one of my very favorite things to do.